My plan A was that I was going to do this from downstairs out by the water with a nice sunset with the GoPro, because I got all the bits to make the GoPro work like it was meant to work really, really well. And I'll talk about that in a moment. And didn't work so well. So I ended up just spending like the last hour mucking around trying to make it work. And then I was like, I have a bar of professionalism that I need to uphold now that I've set the standard with all the studio lighting and everything. Cheers. So this was plan A. This is the GoPro Hero 9 Black. And what it's actually sitting in here, I'll show you how this comes apart. It's kind of neat. And the theory is good, and I'm sure I will eventually get this working well, but it's just not working well yet. What do I press to get that out? Got to press something to get that out, surely. Oops. Nope, that's a charging port. Just don't worry about it. It's a flash on top of a flash permanent light, which whoa, that is bright too. Probably shouldn't put that right at the camera. So it sits on top, which is kind of neat. Excuse me. It's got a little diffuser on top, so you can take a little of the glare out. And it comes in like a media body as well. In fact, the flash is a separate part. So what you can do with this body is it clips out like that, slides out like this, and hopefully it comes out. Let's take a little stand open there. Comes out, and then that's the body like this. And the idea is that you've got an external microphone jack, which sits in just here behind one of the little flaps on the back. And there is also an external USB-C charger, and there is also a micro HDMI port as well. And the plan was, I gave it a bit of a go with this built-in microphone. It was better than the microphone in here, but ended up using a lapel mic off the audio jack, and the audio actually sounded really good. I was really impressed. But the problem is I wanted to live stream with the sucker. And it's like, okay, it's got Wi-Fi, it's got Bluetooth. If you go to the GoPro app, you can start a live stream, but then it's like your mobile device is connected to the GoPro, either over Bluetooth or Wi-Fi. Then the GoPro can Wi-Fi back out, which is fine. Like, we can join all the connections. We've got enough connectivity. But where everything started going wrong for me, actually, it started going wrong when I realized I don't have a GoPro connected to tripod. So I've got every single freaking GoPro connector you could imagine other than GoPro to tripod. So I couldn't mount it on my tripod, which wasn't a good start. And I was trying to use like clips and things. And then I was doing demo runs, basically doing the same live stream technology that you're seeing here, except just unlisted, not public. And the audio is all out of sync. So it's like, and then the sound comes in later, which is just like, it drove me nuts watching it for 5 seconds. And then I'm Googling, and it's like, what you should do is make sure you plug the external microphone in after you already started recording. I'm just like, oh, this just isn't looking good. So I'm going to look more into that. You can also use the GoPro as a webcam, which I've got going on my laptop, but it's beta software for the laptop. And then when I did that, the audio from the external microphone didn't seem to get picked up. In fact, the laptop didn't see this as an audio device at all. It only saw it as a video device. So the best laid plans. I do need to get it working, because I am going to be having what I will call an extensive holiday over the holiday period coming up, which I'm going to talk a bit more about later on. But I'm going to be away for quite a while, only inside the country, obviously, and I will be doing a whole bunch of stuff from various rather awesome locations as well. So I do need to get the mobile things working. I will get it working. Now, the comments, g'day to people in here, including those like John, who I have had many beers with in the past, mate, and other places. Thank you for joining it again. We will come and do it here sometime, or you will come and do it here sometime. I don't know when on earth it's going to be, but it will happen in time. Now, other tech things. New iPhone. So I got the 12 Pro. I think I'd mentioned that in my weekly update last week in the morning. Went and picked up in the Arvo. What is it like? it is a very incremental upgrade from the 11 Pro. Honestly, to use it, you barely notice anything. The only thing I've actually noticed is being able to do night mode with the wide lens, and then the 5G. So the 5G is sort of the thing, right? Like being able to have an actual fast connection. We do have 5G infrastructure rolling out around Australia. It coincidentally aligns with the emergence of coronavirus. Now, I don't know if it's a coincidence or not. I've read some things on. No, don't worry. Anyway, we do have 5G rolling out here, including 5G from this location here at home. So the best speed that I've been able to get so far with an iPhone 12 Pro on 5G is 1,011 megabits a second. So let's call it gigabit, depending on whether your gig is a 1,000 or a 1,024. It's gigabit. So that was actually pretty cool. Interestingly, gigabit down, 23.5 megabits, up, and a ping of 22 milliseconds. Now, I heard a bunch of people being very disparaging, I know, on the internet about my ping, but I also noticed someone chime in sharing a 5G speed test from their 12 Pro in New York, and they had 2 gigabits, like it was literally 2,000 something megabits a second. And their ping was about the same, around about the sort of 20 millisecond mark or something like that. So it seems to be that, and I know that latency is meant to be very low on 5G, but we're still seeing 20 or something. But that download speed is pretty cool. It would be nice to get those speeds on my desktop over my broadband connection from our national broadband network. But having said that, as I replied to someone who was being very disparaging about Australia, because I think they were probably upset they weren't here, I said, look, honestly, I get 58 megabits down, very reliably 58 megabits as well. It doesn't fluctuate much. And it is extremely rare for 58 megabits to actually not be enough. I mean, obviously, that's way more than enough for, say, streaming 4K video on multiple devices at once. It's way fast enough for pretty much everything I do. And the only time I notice 58 megabits not being enough is when I get sent a large data dump or something like that. And it's like, okay, this is going to take a while. Of course, I would like as many megabits as possible, but I'm just saying, like, in real practical terms, doesn't make a whole lot of difference. Speaking about things that haven't worked for me this week. Oh, incidentally, one thing the GoPro does do well is actually work as a GoPro. So probably only about half an hour ago, I posted some video of Charlotte and I at the wakeboard park today, which was actually really good for. So I've enjoyed using it for that. We'll find other good uses. I saw a big stingray in my backyard the other day, and I came running in to get the GoPro and like a big pole so I could like put it down and look at the stingray, and it had decided to depart by the time I got back. But I'll get some stingray shots. So other things that did not work for me this week, and this brings me into the realm of IoT. And this is not the fault of the IoT device. The IoT device in question is a Ubiquiti Doorbell, which I've had sitting there for many months, since before they could even announce it, waiting to be installed. And the theory was, I've got an existing doorbell. It feels like it's from about 1984. It's kind of terrible. Like, it's got a really crusty little video camera inside, and then there's a couple of terminals inside with like a 4x3, maybe even a square screen. But just the picture quality is absolute crap. And to be honest, it just bugs me. So the original theory was get the Sparky, which is an electrician, for those of you not familiar with the term, get him over, and we would take the cover off the doorbell out the front, and then would find the other end of the wires. Now, he had established already it was DC current going out to the external doorbell. Ubiquiti devices AC. So he's like, no problems. We'll just trace back the wires. We'll figure out where they terminate inside, and then we'll put a different transformer on it, and we'll drive 16 volts AC or whatever it is, I can't remember exactly, to the doorbell. So 4 hours later, which I'm sure we'll get a bill for, still can't find the other end of the bloody wires. So that was a complete failure. What we are going to do is now just like literally drill a hole through the concrete wall from the other side, which is in the garden, and run conduit through to an existing external power point. So at least it's like known quantity. We know we can do this. We know we can make it work. It just ain't as elegant as what we would have liked. Now, for the question here about what doorbell do you have, let me show you. It's over here. This, of course, being the new one. The old one, I've got no idea. It is a Uvc G4 Doorbell. Now, I have seen a bunch of people talking about these because they are now public. You can go and buy them. This is what it actually looks like, just like this one here. And I've seen a bunch of people talking about them online and doing YouTube reviews, and they're really, really impressed. And it integrates with the whole Unify Protect ecosystem. So it will do, like, I believe, won't know until I actually get it working, a constant video record, which would be great because this is just sitting in a place that looks out at where people might approach the house. Of course, it'll be able to alert the phone and get video there. My intention is to tie it into Home Assistant and have pressing the doorbell be a trigger for an action, which will then cause my Sonos. I've got a Sonos Play 5 on the kitchen bench and then a Sonos Move in the living room, cause both the Sonoses to talk and tell me that there's someone at the door, rather than having like an external chime box or something like that. I might even be able to include another bit of information in like the text-to-speech, the weather outside or something else stupid and IoT pointless. But anyway, this feels absolutely beautifully made, and I'm really, really looking forward to seeing this working. But it's just gonna take another visit from the electrician to make that one happen. What I did actually get working this week is I got some Akera IoT buttons. And the buttons are Zigbee-based buttons, run on a battery. In theory, will last for a couple of years. They can trigger any action. And the action that I wanted them to trigger was to put the house into either like evening mode, which happens automatically at sunset, but sometimes it's a dark sky. Not usually here, but, you know, sometimes a bit cloudy. So I want to be able to do it manually. And then when I go to bed, I just wanted to have one button I can press rather than having to like trigger an action from the phone. So the buttons look pretty sweet. Still working on that big IoT blog post series as well. There's 5 parts. They're thousands of words each. It's not it's non-trivial, and I do want it to feel complete as well. All right, look at some of the comments here. So I did notice Linus Tech Tips have a video on this. I haven't watched it. I think it was positive. So we'll see. I will give you some honest feedback. Think DOS. So I'm wanting to set up NFC tags around the house and set up an NFC reader on my wife's wheelchair so she can turn on lights for other devices around the house. That is super cool. That is a really interesting idea. I was going to suggest the motion sensors, but of course I imagine you'd want to restrict that just to your wife, especially if she is getting around in a wheelchair. That I can see why that would make a lot of sense. So this is sort of one of the cool things where there are all these use cases that I certainly haven't thought of for IoT before. And I am having fun finding them. So that could be cool. I think DOS loving those Zigbee devices also. They're good. My only challenge is making sure there's coverage. So I couldn't figure out why I've got 3 motion sensors on the stairs. So the stairs go between like 3 levels. So I put one on the top, one on the bottom, and then one just inside a like a landing area in the middle, so that if anyone like walks out at night, it just comes on. And the one on the bottom just wasn't triggering. And it was only when I went into like the VNC'd into decons and could see the Zigbee map, it's like this one keeps dropping off. So the challenge is to not only flood the house with enough Wi-Fi, but also with enough Zigbee coverage as well. ThinkDOS also got 100 Akera temp humidity sensors, which I'm still waiting to get from China. Wow, 100 is a very enthusiastic number. I have got, I think, about 15 of them in a large house, and I've put one in each room. Like I haven't put them in the closets or something like that, but I'm curious to know what you're going to do with 100 of them. That's, as I said, I think the word is enthusiastic there. Now, look, with the coverage, the couple of options for repeaters. So you can get repeaters from IKEA, which literally just plug into a mains. They've also got a little USB adapter, so you can use it as like a USB charger. The problem I have with them, and I'll just pop over my VNC now and see if this is still the case. But when I bought them, I found a lot of people saying that they don't actually work as repeaters for I can't remember if it was for Kera devices or as repeaters for either the Conbi Zigbee sniffer that's in the Home Assistant setup, or it was something else. But there was something about them not working. Now I've got 2 range extenders here on my map. And the range extender I've got in the garage is connected to Charlotte's office temp, wine room temp, laundry temp, entryway temp. Like obviously there's a whole bunch of things connected to that. But then I look at range extender 2 in the master bedroom. Oh, it does actually connect to the master bedroom temp. Okay, that one has connected. And I was wondering if it might just be a proximity thing, but I was finding it was connecting to all the other Zigbee-based range extenders that were on power. So I've turned every one of my Philips Hues, not every one of them, half of my Philips Hues into Zigbee range extenders just by not joining them to the Philips Hue hub, but just joining them straight to the Conbi on the Home Assistant. Incidentally, if you listen to this and it sounds like a completely foreign language, this has taken a lot to get to grips with, and the blog series will explain it. But the IKEA ones do actually seem to work, which is good. So I think it's then just a question of where you put them in your house. And they're pretty cheap too. They're, I think they're like 20, 30 bucks or something like that. So I might need to get some more of those. Now, again, all of this will make a lot more sense for those who think sound like I'm speaking stranger than usual later on. Okay. Think DOS, $35 for 100. How did you pay $35 for 100 Akera switches, but not sure if it's dodgy or not? I think I got a good idea if you paid $35 for 100, because the ones I bought were all about $20 each or something like that. So that might be interesting. I'll tell you what, if I could get 100 for 30 bucks, I'd get 100 as well. But anyway, time will tell. All right, moving on, because I do have things today. So people got upset with me on the internet this week. Which surprises no one. Now, this ended up turning into a blog post because I got upset that people were getting upset with me, if I'm honest. And this, some of you might have read this already, but this comes back to the blog post I wrote about humans are bad at URLs and fonts don't matter. And this was a very flippant tweet of mine at the time. I remember I was standing down there getting a coffee at my local, and I'm reading my tweets, and there's a tweet from Nordvpn, and it says, which of these URLs probably leads to a phishing website, a fake website set up by scammers to extract your sensitive info? So this is the poll. Now, there are 4 possible options here. The first one is https://cnn.com/health. The second one is https://google.com. The third one is https://google.com. We'll come back to that in a moment. And then the fourth one is http://baidu.com. Now, the Baidu address got 52% of the votes. And when I saw it, my initial assumption, because the poll had already finished, so you can already see all the results, my initial assumption was people are picking on the HTTP address, because HTTPS is not served over a secure scheme, but they're conflating HTTPS with trust. So even though these other ones are served over HTTPS, it doesn't make them trustworthy. It just means that if someone's screwing with you, someone else sitting in the middle of the connection can't see it. But it was amazing the number of tweets that went completely off the rails. So I saw someone suggesting that people selected Baidu because they're racist. It's like, okay, well, first of all, it's the only address served over the HTTP scheme. That's obviously the reason. Second of all, I suspect most people don't know what Baidu is. If you don't know what it is, it's China's Google. You know how like China has a version of everything? So yeah, that's Google. Now, I quote tweeted this because the answer was actually the third item. It's one of the Googles. Now, it looks like Google, but it's not Google. It's Googie. And the reason it's Googie is that it's not an L, it's a capital I. And you visually cannot tell the difference. And Twitter, in their poll here, have maintained the case. Now, I guess in fairness to Twitter as well, these are poll answers. And I haven't tried this, but I wonder if you can actually have URLs and poll answers that do actually create links, in which case Twitter could then normalize the link and lowercase everything. I suspect this is just treated as a string, nothing special about it. Any case that was entered has been maintained. Now, I quote tweeted this, and here's what I said. I said, This is a great example of how bad people are at reading and understanding even the domain part of the URL, then making decisions based on that which affect their security and privacy. Now, the whole point of this was to say that people are bad at reading URLs. Now, I include all people in this, including me, and I make multiple points of this throughout the blog post. However, people got upset on Twitter. What are the chances? They got upset for many reasons, not just because they thought the poll was racist. There was a bit of a theme where they said, you're victim blaming. Troy, you shouldn't say people are bad because you are blaming the person. I was like, well, yeah, maybe, but I'm still right. Okay, so it's like that. And that's not to say that I'm not guilty of this as well, because I had no idea what the answer was when I read this. And in fact, in the blog post, I go through to the dev tools in the browser, just use the inspector, change the font. As soon as you change the font, it's clear that Google is actually Googie. Now, the point that I'm trying to make here, and much of this blog post just reinforces this, is that it is very hard for people to read a URL and decide whether they can trust it or not. And a lot of this comes back to the work that the likes of Chrome in particular are doing around trying to focus on what is the right thing to show people so they can make good, sensible decisions about the trustworthiness of a website. Now, my position on this is that whether it's a sans serif font, which then doesn't have all the decoration and everything around them and doesn't differentiate a capital I from a lowercase l, or whether it's a serif font, which would have shown the difference, it really doesn't matter because people don't notice these tiny things. Now, we know that this is true because we see phishing over and over again with domains that are deliberately misspelled anyway. They're deliberately misspelled because you can't get the ones that are spelled correctly, obviously. But this happens the whole time. Now, the solutions I kept hearing from people, some of them were well-intentioned. Some of them are just batshit crazy, if I'm quite honest. I don't know why I upset people. So, there's some comments here saying, someone says here, I've embedded a bunch of tweets in here. Eyeballing a URL before clicking is not too helpful as link text can be different than URL. Than target URL, which is perfectly valid. Like if there's a link on a web page, you can have a piece of text here and then the URL goes something completely different. I do make the point that even if you go to googie.com, which incidentally is a real website, it's a real estate website. You go to googie.com, the difference between googie.com and google.com in the address bar is 6 pixels. So imagine you're running 1080p. There are more than 2 million pixels on your screen. Do you really think people are going to be able to pick the fact that 6 of those pixels aren't quite the right color? It's like, no, they're not going to be able to pick that. Particularly if we're talking phishing, if the website actually looked like google.com and they thought they were going to google.com and they came here, let's say from a tweet, which maintained the case and it looked like google.com, they're not going to pick that up. All right, so there was that. And it's just interesting, the comments. And I think, to be honest, a lot of the comments, again, some of them were well-intentioned, but perhaps just not particularly well thought through. So someone here has said, I've always thought URLs should be rendered with serifs, particularly for this reason. That and /zeros and maybe a warning pop-up for URLs visually similar. And again, the problem I have here is that there are such tiny minor differences in characters in a very small part of the address bar that people are clicking on, coming from somewhere else anyway, expecting the humans to be able to read the URLs and make judgment decisions it's just not going to happen. Now, then there's the whole homoglyph discussion. Homoglyphs being different characters that look similar. So, for example, the letter A in the Latin alphabet and the letter A in the Cyrillic alphabet look basically identical. There's an embedded example here in my blog post. Look basically identical, but if you had one URL with one and one URL with the other, they would be 2 different URLs. And then I go into things like ID and homographs. So using puny code to represent characters from other languages such that in Firefox, they appear identical. So I've got an example of a really funky URL. It's funky in Chrome because it's got all the encoding in it, but in Firefox, it actually renders in the localized language, and apple.com goes to somewhere completely different. So even if it does look right, it doesn't mean it's going to the right website. And then it gets worse. So I've got someone here. It's when people quote tweet me that I find it, and it's not just me, they do it to other people too, find it particularly interesting because they quote tweet to say, look at this person. It's not like a reply in a dialogue. It's like, let me highlight the injustice of this. And look, I'm sure I do it in some cases as well, but in places like this, it just felt like there could have been better dialogue. So this guy says, victim blaming people for typographers and coders' sins. And it's not a sin. It's not a typographer's sin. Typographers create different types. Some of them have serifs, some of them don't. Some of them look like the font from Terminator. It's like, that's just typographers. They create the type. And then as for coders, one of the points I made later on is, like let's take a step back and look at why do we have so many sans serif fonts? Well, we have sans serif fonts on things like Twitter because it condenses a lot of content into a small space. And I've literally quoted out of Wikipedia or somewhere for this. I have serif fonts in my blog, but I've got everything quite spaced out and I've got plenty of space to play with, so it's different. There was another theme that came through which I found super, I don't know, it just feels like these people were high when they wrote this. This lady said, empathy. So this is like, what is the solution to the fact that a lowercase L looks the same as a capital I and it can fool people? Empathy and user-centered design. Design for the users we have, not the users we want. Center their experience, not ours. Create lots of feedback loops and use them intelligently. Oh, and no sneering at people who have niche needs or prefer unusual approaches. The end. Where was the actual answer in that? That's not an answer. That feels like a mission statement. You know, I can't build this. No one can build this. And that theme came through, and someone else has left essays and essays worth of comments on my blog posts as well about feedback loops and empathy. And do we need a button? Should it be red? Like, give me the actual answer. The idea of making motherhood statements, and I think someone got upset that I said motherhood statement actually. And incidentally, a motherhood statement is like a very broad platitude which doesn't actually have anything as substance that's actionable. You can say, politicians often say motherhood statements. It's like, we should reduce the debt and feed the poor. So, okay, cool. How are you going to do it, mate? So there's that. And then it gets worse because the other problem that we have here is that imagine there's no homoglyphs, there's no problems with fonts, there's no typos, anything like that. Do you actually know the right domain names for the places you're going? Now, I've embedded a talk from a lady called Emily Schechter. Now, I met Emily in Hawaii a couple of years ago at LocoMocoSec, and I saw her do this talk, which is absolutely fantastic. So she's from the Google Chrome team, and they invest a huge amount of work in understanding how people use the browser. Like, this is proper full-on focus groups, quantifiable information, evidence, not just speculation. And she has this great bit where she says, do you, looking at the audience of mostly InfoSec pros, do you know which one is the correct Google blog address? Now, she gave 4 options. She said, is it blog.google? Is it google.blog? Is it googleblog.com? Is it googleblog.google? Which is the right one? Because 3 of these could be a phishing site. Now, even if you can read the domain and understand the font, you still don't know if you're in the right place or not. Now, the answer is blog.google. And I don't think that would have been my first pick because somewhere in my brain, I probably would have gone with like a .com, like the googleblog.com option. So anyway, that was sort of there to make the point that even if people can read and understand the domain, that in no way means that they understand that they're in the right place. Now, then this guy. So I just realized I've been blocked on Twitter by this guy. And I only realized because I was like, I wonder if he's still banging on about this. And I don't know if he understands this, but blocking on Twitter is for the most part a really pointless exercise. Muting Now, muting is great because muting, you just get to turn the person down and you never hear from them again. Blocking is pointless because what it does is it completely Streisand's the person. So this guy blocked me and I was like, oh, got to go and have a look at what he's saying now, which of course we can easily do. But this bloke says, yet another blame the end user post. Systems need to be designed to be accessible to everyone. If I have to do special mental or physical gymnastics to use a system, do you have to do physical gymnastics to use a browser? The system is broken, all caps. What's the answer? Like we're still back in this cycle of people telling us what is wrong without telling us what is right. Now, I appreciate that I did start with saying, look, people are bad at reading URLs, but there is now a whole blog post of thousands of words, which includes the bits about here are the things that we can do that actually work. I noticed this bloke actually, because I was curious, made another tweet. Didn't mention me. Can we please stop shaming end users for being bad at computer security? No. Why would we do that? End users don't care. Tell you what, mate, they care when they get their data phished. I know they care when they're in data breaches because they keep sending me emails telling me how much they care. If you treat people better, they're more likely to listen. I said everyone was bad. Like I'm bad at URLs as well. Anyway, this one was weird too. No one in their right mind suggests that stair climber is at fault in this case. You don't suggest stair climbing shoes or personal stair robots. You fix the steps, all uppercase again. This guy needs to have a lie down. Anyway, so look, it sort of went on and I tried to, I was a bit pissed about some of the responses, obviously. So I wanted to have him in there and just sort of articulate in a more sort of clear and concise way what the problems with those arguments were, but also lay out that there are actually solutions for this that do work. So Chrome, Firefox, Edge all have safe browsing implementations or versions thereof built in that do block known bad sites. Now, of course, the site's got to be known to be bad before it goes in there. Nordvpn, who tweeted this in the first place, has Cybersec. So when you're browsing with Nordvpn, Cybersec routes through their DNS resolver, and it does a Pi-hole as a service sort of thing where it blocks known bad DNS requests. 1Password, in fact, someone made a tweet here, the last one I've embedded. They say, use 1Password as your password manager. It won't match the faked domain, hence no password gets entered. That's why Troy recommends password managers. We'll come back to 1Password, which is very true, because if you've got google.com in your 1Password and you do like control/fill it in and you're on googie.com, it won't fill it in. Yes, you can go to the password manager and copy and paste, but if ever this happened to me, I'd be like, hang on a moment, like why isn't my Google stuff pasting in? So I finished this up by saying, want to make a meaningful difference to phishing attacks, stop whinging about fonts and instead get people to, and then do all the things I just mentioned. So that was that. I missed a bunch of comments here. So I got carried away just for a moment there. So what did I miss here? That was still a lot of IoT stuff. We've moved on from there. It's always the developer's fault. Yeah, true, isn't it? Question here from Michelangelo Van Damme. Excellent name, by the way. Question, is there something that can prevent this lookalike URLs to be routed to? But here's the problem. Googie is, I'm trying to say it seriously, but Googie is a legitimate site. Is it actually reasonable to stop a site being routed to just because it looks similar to another one? I don't think it is. And I think there are lots of other sites that have URLs that are very similar to ones that could be phished that it just does not seem right to penalize in some way. And then even if you do, that doesn't stop completely different URLs being used as phishing sites that people fall for. And it also doesn't solve the problem of people actually don't know what the correct address for a lot of URLs is. Even when I look at things like my bank, honestly, off the top of my head, I cannot tell you whether my bank is .com.au or .com. I really cannot remember. I think they probably own both, but even different TLDs. It's a very, very hard problem, even for people like me who think about this a lot. So what's it going to be like for folks that just want to go online and click links and do their Googling, What else we got here? Is it just me, or would we need to basically have massive amounts of people agreeing if a site is a dodgy site or not, and some sort of AI making decisions based on multiple factors? AI came up a few times through this. And as much as we sort of make a little bit of a joke about people overloading the AI term, I think the premise of having some intelligence around identifying what looks like a phishing page is important. The challenge is, though, we do keep having this one-upmanship situation where a lot of phishing pages do emerge on existing websites. I have people very frequently sending me the output of phishing exercises because often all the data they collect is just dumped there as a text file. And time again, they are on legitimate domains. So we're needing some amount of lead time for it to be A, turned into a phishing site, and B, let's say safe browsing to actually identify that it's a phishing site. And it also might just be one page, and it might only be a small subset of people that are sent there. It is a much more nuanced problem than what it looks like on the surface. Question here, I think DOS again. I thought the purpose of internet search engines back was just to provide central website a way to get many websites instead of just links. Yeah, I don't think I can add much more to that. So, all right, what else have we got on here? So, it's actually a little bit out of order because I have two blog posts, but I'm going to leave the last one till last. There were two other things that I thought were sort of interesting this week. Yeah, one of them is super nasty, and it's this Finnish psychotherapy website. So a psychotherapy clinic had data stolen 2 years ago. It looks like the attackers tried to shake them down for 40 Bitcoin, which is about $500,000 USD. What has apparently happened is that the organization didn't disclose the incident when it happened. It looks like there might have been a CEO selling shares and things like that happening at the same time. The thing that's the big news, though, is that when the attackers have not been able to get money from the company, they're now going after the patients. So psychotherapy is enormously personal to people. And to have clinical notes disclosed about an individual, and then these attackers apparently been asking for something like 500 euros from people, like, give us 500 euros and we won't leak your data. And they have been leaking a lot of data. In fact, this story that I tweeted the other day said there's 300 records so far appeared on Tor. Now, when I went to look at the Tor website the other day, because apparently it's pretty easily accessible, people sent me the details. It was offline. Apparently it's getting DDoSed, which I don't feel too bad about. But this is super nasty because it's people who are extremely vulnerable in the first place, very often, who are having psychotherapy. And then to have that level of personal information leaked publicly is just not just leaked publicly, but demanding money for it. I mean, there's Ashley Madison was a terrible incident. People killed themselves over that. That was all the data dumped publicly. I can only imagine it would be much worse to have notes from psychotherapy about very personal, sensitive things. That's just unfathomably evil. And if ever they catch the people behind this, I hope there is no leniency shown. So we'll see how that ends up. The last news was they just kept dumping more data. And, if they're cautious with what they do, they might be able to remain anonymous for some time and keep doing it, which is, it's just unfathomably cruel. All right, not a happy story, that one. One that is more happy after a bad start, is Reincubate. So Reincubate is a service that had a data breach. I had a few people get in touch with me about it earlier this week, had someone send me the data as well. So it is now in Have I Been Pwned, 600,000 records in there. But the reason I'm raising it is they have just written an absolutely epic disclosure notice, a really good one. So their CEO, Aidan Fitzpatrick, has written this up, and it's just like textbook spot on. So lots of stuff about what happened, which is good in a disclosure notice, lots of transparency, lots of honesty. It looks like they got shaken down for money as well. They went straight to the ICO in the UK, the Information Commissioner's Office. which is good. And the relevant authorities, they also, many paragraphs down here, identify the root cause. And they say, we identified the cause of the breach as a set of AWS credentials which had been leaked in a separate incident at Datadog, a cloud monitoring service we use. Now, what I like about this is that arguably this breach happened because they trusted a service with AWS credentials, and that service had a data breach. Now, many, many companies I've seen before would have led with that. That would have been the first thing they said. They would have said something to the effect, they wordsmith this a bit, but we didn't do anything wrong. Someone else screwed up, and we're victims as well. And I just love that Reincubate has been so candid and has not tried to just throw another provider under the bus. And it is obviously very much Datadog's fault here, but I just think it's really, really good the way they have handled this with such a level of professionalism. And I did write to them and tell them precisely that, actually. So I'm very impressed with what they did. Good news story. Good news story. All right, looking at some comments before I go on to the last thing here. So more URL discussions here. All right, let me move on to 1Password. So this is exciting for me. So I have joined the 1Password board of advisors. Now, the first thing that strikes me when I click this blog post is that the artwork they gave me to put on the blog post has a cartoon of me wearing a tie, which, like, do I look like a person who wears a tie? You know, it's but they do know me very well. Other than that short slight, that might have been an outsourced graphic designer or something. And 1Password is a company I've spent a huge amount of time with. So I've spent a huge amount of time in the product. It is almost a decade now I started using it. I installed it at Christmas 2010, and I wrote about it shortly thereafter. So it's a company I've had a long relationship with. I actually posted copies of my receipts into the blog post. I have bought it every single year. I don't know if I'll have to keep buying it now or not, but it's cheap enough. It kind of doesn't matter anyway. So it's something that I've been really personally invested in. A few years ago, they started working with me on Have I Been Pwned. They've got product placement there. So we, as I said at the time, we've had a commercial relationship for a few years. But this is something different because this is now me getting involved with them and having some input into the way the products are built. And there's some things that we're already talking about that will sort of tie into some of the areas that I've got some more experience with. And I'm just really happy to be working with a bunch of really good people. Now, I've been recommending 1Password for many, many years based on my own experiences. And very often people have said, like, why 1Password? You know, why aren't you using another password manager? And I said, look, first of all, when I went through this process a decade ago, that was the one that stood out. But the other thing is that every interaction I've had with them as people has been exceptionally good. And I've had many interactions with many other people from many other password managers. And I'm not just saying it because now I've got the relationship, but I've said this for a very long time. None of them compare. In fact, one of them in particular that all of you know, every time I've spoken to someone at this particular place, it's always been a marketing droid. Every time it's just been about marketing and sales, and it's just so much on how can we sell this thing and monetize and productize and everything else. And then every time I've spoken with 1Password people, it's just always been either engineers or other people that are just very down to earth, doing something that they're passionate about rather than trying to milk it for everything it's got. I have a fun story about this, actually. So last year, I spent some time with a couple of people from 1Password in Europe. And we spent a few days together, and we're in a very sort of rural location getting a ferry. And the guys were wearing like their 1Password t-shirts. And this lady, she must have been in her 50s, comes up and says to one of them, do you work for 1Password? I was like, I use 1Password all the time. It's amazing. It's so fantastic. I sort of said to one, I was like, does this happen much? And they're like, yeah, it happens all the time. So that's pretty cool for something which which at least based on adoption rates of password managers is still a kind of niche thing. And it's a bit of a specialized piece of equipment. So to get feedback like that, I thought was really cool. So I would like to see a lot more of that in the future. Maybe I've got to get me a 1Password t-shirt somewhere along the way. So look, this will be a good relationship. Obviously, this complements what I'm already doing with NordVPN as well, and a lot of what I'm going to be doing with both is similar in terms of devoting cycles to trying to help them make better products and make things more secure. So I'm really excited to see what comes out of this, and I will keep everyone posted with that as it happens. All right, looking at the comments over here. Moving on topics now. Yeah, John, thank you for being pleased with that. It is a very natural association, which is good. So I like Michelangelo's comment here. My 7-year-old had to explain 1Password to his teacher and the other kids in his classroom. I reckon that is a great place to start. And in fact, on my blog post here, I embedded a tweet where I've got a photo of Ari, my son, when he was 10. So this was actually in London in January. That feels like a long time ago, doesn't it? And he's teaching a kid's coding class, and 1Password's popped up for him to log on to Code Combat. And he's like, yeah, this is just normal. Here's how we do it. So that's a great thing for kids to get started on as well. John, the support says... True. The support is really good from 1Password, a very important criterion for me as well, which is, I think, is very important. Certainly everything I've seen from them support-wise has been good, not for me, but what I've seen other people say. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's been good for me, but it's different when you know people there. So yeah, there we go. So look, I'd also love to see as well, like if people have ideas about things I want to see in password managers, or particularly ways to get kids involved. I'm getting really interested in the kids thing now. Particularly as I see my son getting to an age, and his friends around him as well, getting to an age where they can actually start writing code and doing stuff. So I've got a coding session lined up with him and one of his friends because they want to create a website for their Roblox clan. It's like, mate, so long as you want to create a website, I don't care what you create it for. I just want you writing some HTML and some CSS and actually creating stuff. So that is that. Thank you, everyone, for chiming in. I don't know. I'll make this work somehow because I've got to make it work before I go away. And I'll be able to talk more about what I'm doing travel-wise as my plans formalize soon as well. But it's going to be, let's just say, going to be very, very Australian. And I'm looking forward to sharing the progress with that as we start traveling. So with that said, it's a Friday. I think I'm going to go out and actually go out to dinner and do some adulting with Charlotte and have a nice night out. So thank you, everyone, for watching. And I shall see you next week. Bye.